Tonight's presentation is Trilateral Commission, 656, and the Beast. Most of you are familiar, at least by name, with all three of those subjects, and most of you are familiar with the general phrase of who rules us. Is there a God? Is there a devil? And the kind of concepts that are associated usually with the beast, the mark of the beast, and the prophecies of 666. It's been asked many times, well, why do you put all three of these things together in one lecture? I do because I feel that the events of the world, as far as finance goes and as far as people and political governments, seem to dovetail with many of the so-called prophecies of Revelation, which of course I feel that most people have at least held the book, the Christian Bible, in their hands. Most people are familiar with the end of that compilation, which is called the Book of Revelations. And many people, of course, have heard about 666 and the Beast. I find very few people being able to put it together to make any sense. I understand that there are many books written, and some of the books you'll see on the table before you again. Who Rules America, The Assassination Chain, CIA, The Invisible Government, Dope Incorporated, a very hard to get book. And of course, you also notice that there's a book up there called The Invisible Government, which is very interesting. There are two books out called The Invisible Government, and it's been stated by many people that once a book has a published title, that it cannot be duplicated. Well, in effect, I didn't bring but one. I meant to bring the other one too, but there are two books out called The Invisible Government. Again. The oh, well, there I did bring both of them again. The only difference is again, one of it is headed by special CIA report. Explosive bestseller, The Invisible Government. The one that didn't get too much notoriety is the one by Dan Snoop. And again, with the other books that you see the title here by G. William Domhoff, Who Rules America. These books, along with many others, one of which is entitled just simply Trilateral over Washington. And here's a copy of that book title. It's in 1 and 2 stages. Book 1 was a bestseller, and they repeated it again with book 2. Trilateralist over Washington, Trilateralist over Washington 2. These books will simply support, and much and most, I would say, of the information that you're going to hear tonight has come from these books, and again from previous pamphlets, and so not written by me, but by many people who have researched the whole concept of trilateralism. Let's first of all take a look at what the word trilateral means. The idea, again, tri meaning three, and lateral meaning three on an even keel, three on a broad spectrum line, a homogeneous grouping of things that are one, in this case, three. The Trilateral Commission, in general, refers to a group of men in Japan, in what is now called the United States of Europe, and there are now 13 confederated countries making up what is now called the United States of Europe, and the United States of America. These are called first world countries, and the idea is that the means of production, distribution, and manufacture are mainly centered on this planet amongst first world countries, and that if the world is to progress, these first world countries that manufacture, produce, and distribute are the ones that must lead our countries on this planet into the new age. They state that if something happened to Europe, most of the countries within the groupings called Europe, European countries, and or their immediate allies, if something happened to the United States and the countries or states within the United States borders, including Alaska, and of course Hawaii, and if something happened, of course, to Japan, that this entire situation on our planet would become devastating, that the means of production would be lost, the means of manufacture would be lost, and even the means of distribution would be lost. So the idea was that the people on our earth at the present time who deserve to stay alive and live well are those who are keeping our earth afoot. The second worlders are simply called those who have within their borders again the natural resources which can be tapped into to sustain our planet and have lots of money because of that, because they have generally a fairly strong political grouping, a somewhat sizable army, and worldwide recognition. Generally, this category now falls into the Mideast, portions of Asia, places where the United States and its allies have fought, such as Korea, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, these places. And of course, the last grouping, the third world, are simply countries where the natural means of production are innate in the ground. They have to be refined. The governments are weak, the armies are almost non-existent, and all they do supposedly is breed. Consequently, that falls into areas of large portions of Asia, just counting portions of China, especially under the New Guard, Africa, Australia, the portions that are called now the Aborigines portions of Australia, New Guinea, and places where people supposedly breed but have very little to do with protecting, securing, or advancing the general technology of our planet. With that in mind, the Trilateral Organization stated that the heads of these various plants, the heads of these various industries, the heads of these various governments should come together either on a monthly, semi-annual, quarterly basis to discuss the economics, the distribution, and so on again, so that our planet could be more or less correlated. It started off, of course, with various men meeting in councils, and one of the first ideas of this type was what was called the Old League of Nations under Theodore Roosevelt and Stalin and many of the others that met at Potsdam and various places during World War II, and even prior to World War II. The idea that nations that are intelligent should league together was the start, really, of what is now called the Trilateral Council or the Trilateral Commission. It was furthered by what is called the Council on Foreign Relations. And the Council on Foreign Relations, which also still exists, again, has as its chairman John David Rockefeller. Interesting enough, the Council on Foreign Relations has or had many of the most noted business people, the most noted political people, even down to our own Senate, sitting on its board at one time or another. It extended worldwide in its scope. And the idea, of course, innocuous and sensitive and sensible enough by simply saying that businessmen and business people and large heads of industry and large captains of the military and captains of our means of communication should come together time after time in order to decrease the ability to make war or the need for it and to discuss ideas constantly. So innocuously enough, they started again through the League of Nations, later on further through the Council of Foreign Relations, and presently now what is simply called the Trilateral Commission again. The Council on Foreign Relations is the organization that most men or women who have reached either a $1 million category of income or a high prestige and visibility are asked to join. And most people, whether they agree with the originators of this particular policy, want to become members simply for the prestige of it all. They want to be able to say that they belong to the Council on Foreign Relations because almost anybody who is anybody does belong. I won't go on all the names. We could stay here for another half an hour just reading off a list of names of people who do belong again. What is very interesting is that the President of the United States cannot be a member because he cannot be affiliated with any large known commission or anything else that might lead him to have a double hat wearing while he is President of the United States. But we'll find serving on the National Security Council almost everybody who is anybody belonging to the Council on Foreign Relations. George Bush, Alexander Haig, Chester Weinberger, David Jones, and of course William Casey. These are all people who are the heads of the National Security Council. We have under them, of course, George P. Shultz. We have, of course, with Caspar Weinberger, the Secretary of Defense. We have, again, with General David Jones, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and, of course, William Casey, the head of the Central Intelligence Agency. So obviously, these are big and important people. We find, of course, also that Henry Kissinger not only is a trilateralist per se, but also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. In fact, the special advisors to the National Security Council again, and also to NATO, are both David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger. We find also that the United States Tax Court, headed by T. Tannenwald Jr., is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Abbott Washburn, who is the Federal Communications Commissioner. George Daly, who is the Civil Aeronautics Board Chairman. James Duffy, who was a postal rate commissioner, Admiral Bobby Inman, the deputy director of the CIA. And also we have J.R. West, who's assistant to the Secretary of the Interior, Aviation Commissioner on Intergovernmental Relations, again, Bruce Babbitt, and Robert McNamara, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. All of these people, whether by diabolical plan or simply because they wish to be prestigious and are prestigious people, belong to the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations is the American branch of a society which originated in England and believes national boundaries should be obliterated and one world rule should be established again. The Trilateral Commission is international. It's intended to be the vehicle for what is called the multinational consolidation of the commercial banking interests by seizing control, again, through political government of the United States and, of course, their ruling. One is one that says, well, again, the people who are intelligent should band together. The other is one a little bit more possibly diabolic. You'll have to see for yourself and judge for yourself. We find when we look at the heads of media that the heads of CBS, and there are many, the heads of NBC and RCA, the heads of ABC, the cable news network president, the public broadcasting service commissioners, per se, or people associated with it, the Associated Press, UPI, Reuters, Boston Globe, LA Times, Baltimore Sun, the New York Times Company, Time Incorporated, Newsweek, Washington Post, Dow Jones, the Wall Street Journal, National Review. All of these people are, in the main, connected with the Council on Foreign uh, Relations here. What's interesting, again, just to name a few of these men, like at CBS, there is William Paley, there's Frank Stanton, there's Bill Moyer, there's C. Collingwood, and many others. These are currently known dignitaries connected with the Columbia Broadcasting Company. In NBC, we have Jane Pfeiffer, we have Lester Crystal, we have Fiji Patterson, John Petty, David Brinkley, John Chancellor, all people well known for their views and for their prestige in the media. At ABC, we have John Connor, we have Ted Koppel, we have John Scali, Barbara Walters, all part and parcel, again, of the Council on Foreign Relations. At the Public Broadcast Service, we have Robert McNeil, Jim Lerner for the Jim Lerner Report, Harding Carter, people who are very wealthy, make lots of money through the media, and in many cases are millionaires. UPI, we have Harold Stevenson. At Reuters, we have Malcolm Posner. At the Boston Globe, there's David Rogers. At the LA Times, the syndicated version is Joseph Kraft. At the Baltimore Sun, there's its publisher, Henry Trevhill. And of course, the New York Times, there's Richard Gell, James Greenfield, the C.L. Sulzberger, Stephen Ratner, Richard Burt, people, again, who are well known. Time Incorporated, Ralph Davidson himself, Alexander Hurd, Saul Linowitz, and so on and so forth again. At Newsweek, there's Gafford Graham, Frederick Beatty, Mary Garth, Dan Oberdorfer. At Dow Jones and Company, of course, the publishers or backers of the Wall Street Journal, there's William Agee, Richard Wood, Karen House. For the National Review, there's William F. Buckley Jr. and Richard Brookhiser. So you see again that if you're talking about connecting media with a group of people who are, again, prestigious, and again, it's almost like you would say a fraternity, people are asked to join who they feel are the who's who almost of our United States. And as I state again, many of them simply join because to stay without means to kind of lose prestige, and everybody wants to be prestigious. You have Exxon, Standard Oil, also having many of their members that are part and parcel. You have Mobil Oil, Atlantic Richfield, Texaco, Shell, Gulf. General Electric also gets in there, AT&T and Caterpillar. You even cross over, of course, when you get into what is called the commanders of the Army and Navy and Air Force, per se. You have the Secretaries of Defense, again, McElroy, Gates, McNamara, Laird. The Allied Supreme Commanders, on a general basis, there was Eisenhower, all the way to General Ridgway, Bernard Gunther, Norstad, Nimser, Goodpaster, Haig, all belonging again to the Council on Foreign Relations. With the superintendent of the United States Military Academy at West Point, those that train, especially our armed forces and the Army per se. You have Goodpaster and Westmoreland. General Westmoreland, of course, is well known for many of his stands. You just have, as I say, a collage of people, including Malcolm Baldrige, the Secretary of Commerce. You had Robert Anderson, the Secretary of the Department of Labor. With Chrysler Corporation, of course, you had Jerome Holland, Najib Halsey, and General Motors. You had Reuben Jensen. It just goes on and on. So as you can begin to say, it's not a small group of insignificant people. It is not people who are not intelligent. It is not people who are not very rich and even super rich. And it's not people who do not have world visualization or world visual. But people, again, who have come together in the United States to band together with people in Japan and people in Europe to create what is called now, of course, the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission took, because of the number of elitists that were in the Council on Foreign Relations, many of these same people, and brought them together. Many men who do wear the same hats of being both with the Council on Foreign Relations, or maybe I should say people, not just men, and being with the Trilateral Commission. One would be, of course, Henry Schott, a very high-placed person with CBS again, P.G. Peterson with NBC and RCA, John Sawhill with NBC and RCA, with the L.A. Times, Joseph Kraft, of course, a well-known person again. You have, again, Saul Linowitz with Time Incorporated and William Scranton with the New York Times. You have you have not Strike Philip Graham, but R.J. Miller with Newsweek and the Washington Post. You have, again, Philip Hawley with Atlantic Richfield. You have Lee Morgan, again, with Mobil Oil. You have Otto van Amergausen with Exxon and Standard Oil. You have John F. Buckingham with General Electric, and the list just goes on and on. So many of these people, even though they are also part of the Council on Foreign Relations, are part of the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission itself, as I state, has the purpose to unite the peoples that are productive of our world. They are not hiding, per se. They're very proud to be. And when interviewed by many of the people who wrote the books that I talked about, and of course with the two authors of both the Trilateralist over Washington I and the Trilateralist over Washington II, Anthony C. Sutton, Patrick M. Wood, they readily gave, in many cases, interviews to these people. So the names that I'm using are not new. They're already known. And they've stated before, what is a hullabaloo over being a trilateralist? In fact, it probably will help to deter a possible Third World War. It possibly reduce many of the prices of things, because if people can come together with a means of production with one set price, with the unions not becoming overbearing and tariff duties being all free and fair, that these things can only benefit our planet. And from an outward view, this is probably right, per se. We'll have to see. The next thing I want to get into a little bit is the secondary basis of what is called the idea of 666 and what is called the beast. When we talk about 666, of course, we're talking about strictly three numbers that come up in what is called the Christian Bible, in what is called the Book of Revelation. It refers to the number of the beast, that many will fall and serve the beast, that many will be marked in the forehead by the beast, and that nothing will be able to be bought and sold unless sanctioned by the beast. It states also that the beast of Revelation are really quadrupled, or threefold and quadrupled. They have some that will fly. They have some beasts that seem to have wings and fins. They have others with giant claws. And they say that these beasts, of course, were a vision in Revelation by St. John the Revelator, and that through this he began to see end-time prophecies, or what would happen in the future to our world, and supposedly if the books concerning the plagues that would fall to man, and the very charismatic talkings about the harlot that sits on 7 hills. And if you've read the book of Revelation, you're familiar with some of the things I'm talking about. He talks about the various churches, the church in Philadelphia, the church in Ephesus, and how many of these churches are false. It's quite a interesting corollary and mishmash, because to interpret it, you almost have to be a genius. And so there have been many interpretations lent toward just what this book meant and what some of these prophecies are really all about. But to look at 666 and the beast, it is my conclusion, and many that I guess share the kind of ideas that I have and the kind of research that I've done that say that this is probably short-sighted, that the beast of 666 may not be so much metaphysical as some kind of a huge dragon that flies in the air and destroys man for their wickedness, as some kind of a huge whale or sea monster that devours people that go by sea, or some kind of a land roving creature like an ancient dinosaur that destroys all in its midst. That the plagues involved may be more than just the kind of concepts we're talking about now, but maybe simply symbolic. That the symbology involved here is to be interpreted as man becomes more and more intelligent and more understanding of his planet. And I kind of agree with the latter. There are many fundamentalists, I'm sure, that would take exception to that, and that is their privilege. The way I'm looking at it is that that book talks about, as many of the quatrains of Nostradamus, as many of the prophecies of Mother Shipton, as many of the statements of St. Odilio and of Moscus, of Edgar Casey, and many of the prophets, that these are simply symbols. And it is up to us, when that age comes, to have the intellect, the wisdom, and the guidance to interpret them properly. So I simply began to look around for that particular number, 666. And I began to look at the idea that through the Trilateral Commission, if one world government is the end idea, if it means that it's able then to save money and time by, again, controlling the means of manufacture, production, and distribution, that they would have to have some kind of way to coordinate that among some 6 billion people on Earth. Given and taken that the third world people, which comprise 3/4 of our Earth's population, may be non-existent to their existence because we do not or they do not contribute, it simply stated that they must have some way of coordinating that. And with wire services, news, media, all types of television, all cable and satellite propensity, then I stated to myself that there must be only one way that this could be controlled, and that would be through a computer. And we find now that computer science is the new boondoggle and the new baby of the new age. They have Silicon Valley out in Southern California, in which almost all of anybody who is anybody in the industrial empire dealing with computer production or in some way allied to what they call high tech is there. They have out on the East Coast almost the same kind of correlation and corollary. And interesting enough, in the movie recently out now, A View to a Kill, that is the theme of the movie, to destroy by flooding in an unnatural earthquake Silicon Valley. It's been stated again, they probably laugh because they just simply move out of the valley and go to the heights. But whether or not that is true or whether or not it is true, the idea is that computerization and computer science is now part and parcel of our way of life. They have now been able to reduce through just using silicon chips and computer chips and crystals thoughts down to micro miniaturization. They even speculate now that by 1999, they'll be able to put a whole chip on just a small portion of the index finger, like you see me holding up of your finger, and on that can make over 200 programs. Now, if this is the case, this means that soon a computer about the size of these boxes that I have here will be able to run a whole city. That is Buck Rogers. That is Orwellian. That is H.G. Wells in its furthest context. That means also that robots with micro, sub-micro miniaturized brains are a possibility. Because when you can begin to do that, you almost begin to program the engrams and synapse points within our own brains. When you can micro miniaturize 200 programs to be held in context on one chip, and that chip, or maybe let's say 20 of those chips could fit just on the dex of my index finger, then you're talking about advancement. Toward that end, some research has proven to be very interesting. They had, again, in Belgium and in Luxembourg per se, a computer. The computer was 1 square block square. It occupied 3 stories, as I understand, of a 10 or 12-story building there. And all 3 of those stories on a 1 block square basis, which means 3 floors, are dedicated to nothing but computer. Anything that helps this big computer that is there to work is there. Hardware, software, chip micro miniaturization, processing plants, coding plants, programmers, punchers, the whole bit. They state that some of the most sophisticated hardware and some of the latest in software is sent there first, and we later get it released here in the United States. It stated also that there is a huge computer now either completed or in construction in Japan. And of course, in our own state of Colorado, we have one here. But the big baby that is dubbed, by the way, the Beast, exists there in Belgium. What's interesting about this whole thing, it's been stated that that computer has enough capability to give 3 sheets of nothing but information, microprocessed. You can imagine then how small that might be on everybody on our planet Earth and still have room to do 2 other planets. That is just how refined now and sophisticated that computer is. And of course, the Social Security code is the one thing that lets everybody all over the world now know anything about anybody else that can get to that computer. They have your whole history now through your Social Security. From your banking status, your monetary status, anything that you enter your Social Security number can and probably is now alive on this one computer. So it means a complete sheet within minutes, at the most seconds probably, on anybody in the world. They say, well, that's good, because in this age, people need to be, since free flow of traffic and travel, people need to be caught up with and followed, and also for their own protection. That may be. But the fact is that that's now a distinct possibility and probability in effect there. When I look further again at the numbers 666, I begin to see them jumping up in very interesting places and in profuseness. I found that when I checked the IBM listing on Stock Exchange, the number for the IBM code listing is, guess what? 666. I found that shoes imported from Italy are code dated with the number stamped inside them, 666. Found also with research that President Carter's personal security force and now President Reagan's personal security force have tanks, arm patches, planes, all coded with the number 666. That Jules and Dominic's and many superchains have computers which are activated by the number 666 and then a couple of other numbers hit afterwards. Even the scanners that are there locally have to go through a double 6 number, and then upstairs, usually in the central control unit, they have a 666, which activate another computer with 666 and maybe 2 or 3 other digit placements in order for those scanners to be turned on in the store, which means all of those stores now and the products are all being controlled by a computer. Interestingly enough, too, innocuously, innocently, not too long ago, people were subjected or opened to what is called generic products. The idea was that generic products, even though they had date codes, were equal to the other products. It's just that they didn't have a bunch of brand names. And it began to be rumored that many of the processing plants anyway simply took one item and put different labels on it, that you were getting the same thing with just different labels. That rumor has persisted for a very long time. This, they said, was a step toward being a little bit more honest, also because of not having to go through the label battle. They could sell these things cheaper, they could market them cheaper, they could ship them cheaper. Consequently, generic products are now in many of our aisles. It is the idea, seemingly, of one world government that soon all of our goods will be just the same way, in black and white labels, simply tell you what's within them, with no product combatants, because it will all be under one central control. Seemingly, the generic state was a step to test the product consumability of consumers toward a item just put out without any kind of colorful labeling. Seemingly, it's gone over quite well. The Learjet Corporation code number is 666, stamped on many of its jets and many of its other merchandising. It's a very fast-growing conglomerate. Arab businessmen's license plates in the city of Jerusalem, thanks to the Israelis, are now coded with the prefix 666. And once that businessman does not have that, he's either subject to a ticket or subject to questioning. South Central Bell telephone bills and the South Central Bell payroll checks cannot be cashed and cannot be issued unless that code is affixed to the corner. And if you check many of those bills and payroll checks, they find that even the cashing card must have 666 on it if you're a South Central Bell employee. I understand since that time that is now spreading with the bust up of AT&T, and most now of the AT&T affiliates or defiliates have that same kind of existing 666. The Sears credit card and credit transfer bills and billings now have also 666. And what must also be understood is that 666 to a computer does not have to be in even spaced digits of 6, 6, and 6, but simply the numbers 696, 996, whether they be linear, whether they be horizontal, which I'll be showing on the board during our question and answer sessions again, but any multiples leading to digits, whether they be a cluster of 6 points in a circle, or a diamond, or some kind of diagrammatic or schematic. It doesn't matter. Computer reads them all the same way. So there are many ways of putting down, even innocuously, 96, and then drawing a dot and having within that dot maybe 6 different placements. And the computer will scan it and pick up the same kind of 666. When you take this in consideration, that the number 9 and the number 6 are 1, this begins to broaden to many facets of our operating world today. And I think that you will find on your own research probably even more numbers than I've listed now, or more items, or more places, or more businesses, or more areas which are utilizing 666. 666, or the mark of the beast, is very interesting also. You will find, too, that the idea that the person cannot buy or sell unless he comes under the jurisdiction of the beast, or so paraphrased from the book of the Bible, can begin to be understood. It's been stated that crime is going upwards in our country, mainly because many people are out of work. Many so-called first world countries feel the same kind of thing. Deficit spending, high tax inflation has caused, of course, a number of people to be thrown out of work. And it's been stated that it becomes very dangerous. It's been stated also that one world card is almost necessary. And if you're going places now and you find if you don't have a Visa or a MasterCard, you really have problems buying, and especially credit buying. The cash sometimes is not as well taken as is one of those two cards. Some people will refuse your cash or ask you, well, why pay for this in cash? Why do we write up in a credit card? Because they can get immediate interest. They can just run up so quickly if your credit is good, so much more than the actual cash outlay you have. Because most people are kind of watchful when they have to spend their money. But on a credit card, it's easier to run up. It's been proven by marketing statistics 3.5 times the normal spending rate a person will use by having one card to be able to consolidate all of those bills. So they're fast coming to a time when money will be obsolete. The reason they say money wears out, it has to not only be laundered illegally, but it has to be taken in and burned, supposedly, and new money is reissued because it wears out, especially paper currency, which is a higher standard for most first world countries. They also find that the credit card, of course, if it's lost, can be replaced, whereas money, if it's lost, can't be replaced. It's usually a deficit to the person who loses it. They also find, again, that with many of the world's countries having different types of currency, the yen, the pound sterling, for just two examples, and of course the American dollar, that if there was one card that could be accepted worldwide, you wouldn't have to even go to the money exchanges to have the money broken down. Because in many cases, with the devaluation or invaluation of a dollar or a yen or a pound sterling, there is controversy. So with one card, you wouldn't have to worry about that controversy. You simply go there and buy within that country. It would be accepted worldwide. So you have one way of avoiding the money exchanges and the time spent in tariff departments and money exchange bureaus. So again, they say all more reason to use one world card. What's interesting about one world card, however, is that with a central computer, if they state that one world card is only valid to have this amount this month, or it has reached its minimum, and you have no money that's acceptable, you're out of luck. It means that a person who has lots of money, or a person who has lots of credit, can then outsell you, and it even means possible starvation unless somebody wants to help you out. With that kind of a concept, then we find that many of the world governments are beginning to crack down on what it is called government dole or government handout, which means again that the ADC, that the workmen's compensation grants, that the government aiding to people who are out of work, whether it's their fault or not, is being challenged. And as we know from our present administration here in the United States, many of those so-called doles, many of those government support policies are being severely challenged, and many people are no longer able to draw unemployment compensation and so on like this, which means, again, that with no credit card, no work, and no possible means of survival, either they must live on others or what? That is one of the detriments possibly of one world government, one world card. But again, it's been stated again, that means that people will have to buckle down, learn a skill, come into high tech, into the new age, or, and the alternative you'll have to possibly figure out. In looking also at the idea of what's being presented presently, along with the 666 scheme, is that the means of production, control, and distribution have been more or less swallowed up. There are individual families and friends and relatives and cousins and good fraternal buddies and good sororal sisters who control many of these industries, which means that to get into these industries now becomes more difficult. Small businesses, as we've learned from the Small Business Bureau and small business loans, are drying up. The vitalization or revitalization of small businesses is talked about, but in most cases now you're finding huge conglomerate company mergers. You're finding that in general, companies are coming together rather than staying apart. You're finding now one company that maybe used to be in textiles, now may be not only in armaments, but maybe in computer software. You're finding one company that was known as one thing because it produced one thing now might go into even baby diaper fields and correlations and crossovers. This kind of thing becomes dangerous simply because it means that the need of the small businessman to visit the ma and pa stores is limited because the first thing they're going to find is they cannot be competitive with the outdated prices that they're charging. That when a company is worldwide, maybe within the United States might be in 30 or 40 states, and maybe three or 400 cities within those states. Mass buying. The local ma and pa store can't begin to compete with that. Some of these companies are in every country, literally in the world, and sometimes almost in every big city in the world. There's no way a small buyer can compete with that, which means that the ability for the small businessman, as it's been stated again, to build a better mousetrap and have it accepted is really ludicrous. He may build it, but he'll never get it marketed. He'll never get against advanced billing on it. He'll never be able to find a location of distribution that's sizable. He'll never be able to get out his credit mailings and so on and so forth again. It is stifling small business. And those that can crack through are coming together to join in multinational corporations. Because of this, they must have ways of investing the monies that they make, or in liquidating other companies, or in financing other companies, which has led to what is called international banking, international financing, and control bureaus. They have whole portfolios now with companies. Now, this one, because it's been notorious lately, E.F. Hutton. There was a commercial that ran on TV for some time that stated, when E.F. Hutton speaks, everyone listens. And then, of course, the big scandal came with E.F. Hutton that they had invested monies far beyond that they should have. And the scandal is on. Well, that's not just true probably with E.F. Hutton, but the probabilities are there for any company because the ideas of multinational investments and what we would call interlocking directorates, where boards of directors sit on many corporations, are possibilities now. And with the freeing up of government loans and government aids, as a little man no longer can go out and get small business loans or aid to dependent children, or even is argued about how long can he draw workman's compensation or unemployment compensation, big companies are being financed. I think most of you are familiar with what happened again with the Chrysler Motor Corporation. And Ayatollah, of course, stated, well, we're going to see this through. But what happened here? We had the government saying a business could not go out of business. That because of the number of people that it influenced, the number of people that it employed, that it was too big of a loophole or a floodgate would be open to let Chrysler go out of business. So they financed Chrysler. They gave Chrysler billions of dollars. They gave Chrysler billions of dollars in credit references, which is almost as good now as a dollar or maybe even better. They refused to let Chrysler go out of business. But interestingly enough, Chrysler has investments in foreign auto companies. And yet, of course, we're financing Chrysler to keep Chrysler in business. Wouldn't it be nice if every time each of us opened up a business and we didn't seem to be able to make it in the business, someone would say, well, in your neighborhood, you're too needed. We're not going to let you close your doors until people buy more of your product. We'll make sure that you get money. That's an excellent way of backing things, but unfortunately, when a person asks that maybe has worked for years and the Social Security benefits are running out, It was this administration that even played with the idea of cutting back on Social Security, and in some senses already has. So we're seeing what is called a possible double standard. It's been said for many years that the farmers were the backbone of the American industries because if people couldn't eat well, people couldn't think well. If people couldn't think well, they couldn't work well. If they couldn't work well, our high tech would be lost. Yet now we find that the small farmer is being put out of business. The small farm is falling victim to the conglomerate farms, big business farms that do things through mechanization, spending hundreds of millions of dollars monthly to make sure that their crops are harvested, that they're controlled, quality control inspectors, state boards of inspection. The small farmer can no longer compete. And that is bad too, because the small farmer could come into a neighborhood market and if his crops were plentiful, could make a deal with you directly. Now that's against the law. And the big businesses are beginning to make a deal with big businesses, and you can usually get things almost now as cheaply as the farmer can produce them. The only trouble is the quality and the standard. Because it's been shown that many of the things we find in our produce sections of our stores have been gassed in warehouses and are now over a year old. Many of the apples that you eat, if you cut into them, you'll see that they are red color dyed, where they were pea-picked, pre-picked, and gassed, and even colored. Yet it used to be that when an apple was colored, you had to put on there color added. Now, nothing is stated about it. You get some of the red delicious apples and some of the other Macintosh apples, and you cut into them, no sign on the labeling for color added, yet we find that the color has been added. What does this simply mean? Either they were picked too soon, which means the market value and therefore the spoilage is cut off. They were picked when the crops were bountiful and plentiful and have been held in warehouses until the crops were low and then sold because they can get a higher market value. They also are being treated and they're not being labeled as having been treated. This is dangerous. If you had competitive small farms, then this would not be possible simply because the small farmer would give you a better apple and you could pick and choose. Since there is no longer picking and choosing, but mass cooperative conglomerates, then you can begin to see the dangers involved in that. There have been all kinds of meat scandals where they said that the asbestos law, DES, was added to meat. They find now that many of these meat chains were under so-called government controls, and yet the government controls did not say that DES was bad. Later on, we found that DES was used in many of the women's birth control pills and was found to be not only cancerous, but it caused many lesions and tumors within women directly attached to DES. Again, we see that conglomeration and non-competition is dangerous because the means of control and the means of competition are pretty much one. When a person grows a better apple, you buy it. When all the apples are one, you have no choice. You simply buy what is there. The whole concept of one world, one idea, one means of transportation, one means of distribution may sound good on paper. But we've found previously that when there is no competition or little competition, begins that the idea of quality control may possibly fail. I now like to get into what is called the prophecies. Many of you have heard about the prophecies leading to the year 2000, the idea of a new age or the age of Aquarius, the idea that there have been many prophets such as Count Germain, Saint Odilio, Nostradamus, Edgar Casey, Mother Shipton, Moschus, Apollonius, Paracelsus, who have stated that many things are going to happen on our planet, who have stated that they have been able through quatrains, through interpretation, through visual sightings, through dreams, to say that in the age coming up, many things will begin to happen that will astound mankind. Now, whether or not these were predicted for the coming year 2000 or not, it is my assumption, and the assumption again, therefore, of this presentation, that they are applicable to what is called the age of Aquarius. We right now are in what is called the arc of Cosmon. We are not yet Aquarius. The age of Aquarius will start with the year 2001. So preliminary to that start, I feel that many of the following prophecies either are happening, have happened, or will happen, even though some of them may not register with you and some may. Therefore, we will now get into those prophecies as we see them. Prophecy 1. A man who will call himself a name interpreted as God and who will work miracles will be told to be living in the Gobi Desert. 3. Pyramids, monoliths, and granite formations around the planet Earth will give off resonant vibratory emissions and a humming sound. Prophecy 4. A battle will be fought in the 51st state, Alaska, which will be invaded. Prophecy 5. The Christian church will waver, falter, renounce, and then topple. Prophecy 6. Diseases and epidemics combining forces and energies normally inharmonious will afflict people for no apparent outward cause, and millions of people will die all over our planet Earth. Prophecy 7. Two new planets, in addition to a confirmation of the 10th one, will be rediscovered, and the confirmation of the last Apollo mission will be admitted so that man on Earth will learn that he has 12 planets in his system instead of 9. The 8th. Most of the islands of Japan and the smaller tributaries will be swept away into the ocean. Prophecy 9. Most of Norway, Britain, Sweden, Denmark, Ireland, France, and Spain will be flooded. Prophecy 10. Continued warming temperatures in the Antarctic, Arctic, and colder areas of Earth. Prophecy 11. A new landmass, larger than most so-called islands, to appear in the Atlantic Ocean. Prophecy 12. Earthquakes in India, Japan, the Azores, Iraq, Iran, Mongolia, Russia, the United States, Finland, Hawaii, Australia, Mexico, South America, and the island of Bali. Prophecy 13. New lands appearing in the Gulf of California, the Red Sea, the Pacific Ocean, and near Jamaica and Bimini in the Caribbean. Prophecy 14. The forgotten use of ultrasonics, infrasonics, ultraviolet, and infrared for both healing as well as destruction will be rediscovered. Prophecy 15. The causes of cancer, the common cold, muscular dystrophy, infantile paralysis, and all major diseases of humans will be understood and properly treated. Prophecy 16. Women will start to lose their hair in the early 80s and continue through the 80s, and they will accuse beauty product manufacturers and purveyors when the real reason will be glandular and hormonal disturbances due to pollution and electromagnetic imbalance. Prophecy 17. The discovery of two new moons circling the Earth, one 500 miles away and the other 750 miles away, will be announced. Prophecy 18. Gravity, as is presently understood, will be found to be a myth, and anti-gravity machines will fill the air. Prophecy 19. Life will be found to exist in space, on planets, and within them. Prophecy 20. People in every race on Earth will grow taller and possess extrasensory perception, ESP. Prophecy 21. Three-dimensional television, coupled with vibrotonic smell and feeling, will be invented. Prophecy 22. Light will be found that does not travel, and our planets that will be discovered are much closer than they have seemed to be. Prophecy 23. Plants and flowers will bloom out of season, and animals will not be able to bear their young. 24. Auras will be seen around most people, especially the young on our planet. Prophecy 25. Mount Vesuvius and Mount Etna will have violent eruptions. Prophecy 26. Utah, Nevada, parts of Arizona will have floods and rains alike that will make these lands muddy for years to come. Prophecy 21. Eruptions in the Sierra Madres, Rocky Mountains, and Allegheny Range will shock people all over our planet. Prophecy 22. Terrible earthquakes will occur in Alaska, and the well-known San Andreas Fault Trench, which runs some 600 miles along the coast of California, will break, causing most of the land comprising Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, San Jose, Santa Barbara to be inundated. Prophecy 23. Flooding will occur gradually and then suddenly along the east coast of the United States, with most of New York City going underwater, the southern parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and Philadelphia becoming extremely flooded. Prophecy 24. The Great Lakes will overflow and empty out through Lake Michigan near Chicago, which will cut a path like the Mississippi River down to the Gulf of Mexico, and smaller tributaries in the surrounding area will completely dry up. Prophecy 25. Strange objects and visions will be seen all over the earth's skies. Prophecy 26. Creatures that can only be described as monsters will be seen on land and in water. Prophecy 27. Our sun will change polarity, and the sun will be said to be neither hot nor bright. Prophecy 28. Earth will be found to have another sun, and an embryonic sun will soon be discovered throughout our galaxy. Prophecy 30. Earth will finally have peace for a millennia in which the inhabitants of Earth will have to flee our entire solar system. In conclusion, for tonight's presentation would be the idea that if one man feels that he is subject to other men's rule, then the logic would be that other men are also subject to the Creator's rule, even though some feel that God is dead. The idea that our planet is a live being, that our planet is also judging who is cancerous with honor and who is benign with honor, also is a reality in metaphysics. The idea also that many of the hidden people behind the government may be aliens to not only our planet, but to our solar system, and are simply using by mind control, sublimination, and implantation the minds of many of our leaders, even against their very knowledge, for many of them are simply controlled robots, if you would. The idea also that the New Age consciousness is to simply state that the world is not coming to an end, but simply coming to a new order of viewing, that our planet is beginning to take on the vibrations, which means that not only should we think of one world government in a positive sense, that does not take away from the weak or give to the strong, but one world government in a sense that would be beneficial for the totality of mankind. The punchline simply is that in many cases, the God we serve is so close to watching and intervening upon us that we sometimes can't see the fire or, again, the small brush fires. We can't see the big forest for the individual tree. And that the New Age consciousness is not in the future, but is now. Watch the statements that are said by many of the leaders, even though they may seem negative. Usually during the speech, especially if it's over 15 minutes long, they will make one Freudian slip. They will make one error, which will really offset the entire speech that was said and show themselves really for what they're really saying. That will become a rule more than a infrequency or a thing that does not happen that much. In closing, I simply state not only to watch the skies for for signs, but to watch the media for sound. Sometimes the sound that is conveyed is not what is meant to be conveyed, but simply the truth.